Hi, welcome to Planetary Calendars, Astro Portraits. I'm Ralph Demetrius, one of the calendar's astrologers. This is part of our Superwoman series, and the actress this week is Mila Jovovich, who was in The Fifth Element, was I think the first movie we saw her in. It's a bit of a cult favorite. Ultraviolet, Resident Evil. She's been in a lot of these action movies, movies that require a lot of physicality. She's born December 17th, a Sagittarian, 1975, a Wednesday, at 5:15 p.m., which is minus 3 hours because it was in Kiev, or as we say, Kiev, in the United States, Ukraine. Interesting in that there's not that many of these action actresses that are Sagittarius, which you would think they would be because it's a very physical thing. Sagittarius is Jupiter and physicality. But she is especially interesting because she's born at 25 degrees Sagittarius. So it means it's in tropical Sagittarius and in sidereal Sagittarius. So it's the real thing. 25 degrees Sag is also the galactic center. It's a place of great strength, great power. It's in the 6th house. And here we start to see the Mercury-Mars connection that weaves so many of these charts together. This is a Mercury-ruled house. It's the house of Virgo. So it's about the work. It's about carrying out the work. It's about being mutable. It's about being shaped to what your director wants you to do. Okay. It's also, as I mentioned in the intro to this whole series, it's one of the pawns. You see Mercury and Mars on the chessboard. They're the pawns. They're the ones who go out there in the front and get into stuff. And in her roles, she certainly gets into stuff. I mean, she gets into everything, She has Cancer rising, which is actually very, very feminine. Okay. That's not really what you expect, but, it's very feminine. She comes across very much as, a girl, even though she has this fire sun position. But she has the moon in Gemini. Aha. Okay. She also has Mars in Gemini. She also has Ceres in Gemini and Selena in Gemini. So she has these powerful Gemini energies, this Mercury-ruled energy in the 12th house. Jupiter's house. Remember, it's Pisces, Jupiter's house. So you have this interesting polarity going on where you have Sagittarius in a Mercury-ruled house and Mercury-ruled planet in Jupiter's ruled house. So you have that polarity going on. So you have that athletic quality and that quickness that's going on. So, and if you ever watch her movie, she's incredibly quick. I mean, I realize some of it's how she's filmed, but still, there's a great sense of athletic skill combined with youthfulness and quickness. She has Venus and Uranus in Scorpio. This is kind of like Sigourney Weaver. So much of her chart is actually, Sigourney Weaver's chart's very, very feminine, and yet she has that Venus in Scorpio. Venus is the epitome of the feminine self, right? It's our ability to reach out to other people. Hers is in Scorpio. It's also conjunct Uranus in Scorpio, so it's electrified by that. It's in the 5th house of creativity. It's interesting because Venus in Scorpio is actually it's a very sexy position in some ways. In the 5th house, it's really about my power. The 5th house is very about my talents, my power, my creativity. And having Venus there, it means that ability to kind of artistically use her power in exciting ways, conjunct Uranus. What's interesting is that the Venus is loosely, especially the Uranus, is trying that that rising in Cancer. So it's very supported there. So, that rising in Cancer is ruled by that moon in Gemini. There's a playfulness there, and it's supported by the Mars and the Uranus in the 5th house in Scorpio. There's a lot of stuff going on there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's being moved around the chart and focus. And that's one of the things I say sometimes, an astrological chart's kind of like a wiring diagram. It's in the wiring diagram, these wires run this little pump, and this one over here runs this motor, and this one goes here. And you're saying, well, who's moving what to where? The energy is being moved to different places to attain things. And here, the Venus is supporting, that her basic approach to life. Okay, the moon, the Mars in the 12th house. The 12th house is something we see very prominent in actors, especially people who move in the movies, work in the movies, because it's about make-believe. It's about your ability to create a world, about creating an illusion, and having Mars and the moon there in Gemini. She's very quick to do it. She's very facile. The thing about Gemini, about the Mercury ruled signs, Gemini and Virgos, they're very facile. They're very quick to change things. They're very quick to manipulate it. They'll think their way through a dozen different solutions before they do the right thing, but they'll do that all like that. They'll just very quickly they'll consider all the different possibilities and then act. They're not inclined to overthink it. They'll just think their way through it quickly. And she has that particular talent, within a studio space, to come up with solutions fast. She's probably someone who's very good to work with because she helps move things along. Remember that, she's not quite a full moon child, with the sun in Sag and the moon in Gemini. Exactly, it's not within aspect because it's 12 degrees to 25 degrees. Though, when we first learned astrology a long time ago, they considered the orb for the sun to be up to 15 degrees and the moon to be 12 degrees. So in that situation, these would be oppositions. It's interesting. So she's actually the polarity of Nicole Kidman, who's actually a Gemini sun and a Sagittarian moon. Something about that polarity, one is Jupiter ruled, one is Mercury ruled. It's always interesting that if you ever look at our work with it was called the Sacred Triangles, about the rulerships, the detriments and such. The two planets that fit into that particular geometry, that have the same geometry, are Mercury and Jupiter, in that their ruling signs are all squares to each other. Jupiter, it's Sagittarius and Pisces, which are 90 degrees to each other, and the detriments are, of course, opposite those. It's the same thing with Mercury. It's Virgo and Gemini. It's a square, so their detriments are opposite it. They have the same triangles. It's the smallest planet. No, Pluto, of course, is smaller, but it's not part of this equation. And the largest planet. And they use the same planets, and they actually fulfill the four mutable signs. So each other's detriments are the other one's rulers. So there's a great similarity between those two. And of course, if you think about it in terms of this, Jupiter is huge and has huge amounts of leverage in the solar system. Mercury's leverage comes from being so close to the sun. And it has tremendous leverage because of that. So she has that kind of polarity. She has that ability to use leverage in many different ways. And someone who does this kind of very physical work has to be able to understand that instinctively, to understand how do you leverage yourself physically in these situations. To do these kind of roles, you have to be physically highly skilled. You have to be able to have great control over your body, even though, of course, they're using special effects and rigging and things like that. It's still not easy. You have to work with them, and you have to be able to work with them quickly enough that the movie can move on, because remember, time is money in the movies. So it's a very interesting chart. One thing that's especially interesting in this, I mentioned about, you got the Mars-ruled Venus, you got the Mercury-ruled Mars and Moon. Well, guess who else is the big player? I just mentioned about, Jupiter and Mercury. Well, where's Jupiter? Jupiter's in Aries, 14 degrees Aries in the 10th house, the house of career. In the house of career, Jupiter in Aries, that she would be a personality. So you have a Mars-ruled sign, Jupiter, Venus is Mars-ruled, and then you have the Moon and Mars in Mercury ruled signs. So you see this continuing pattern, that willingness to get into stuff and move it along and not necessarily count the cost. So, hope you found it interesting. Look forward to the next one in the series. We haven't figured out who that one is going to be yet, but I'm sure it will be interesting. Come see us at Planetary Calendar Astrology on YouTube, where you can find our portraits every Tuesday, and you can find our forecast for the coming week on Fridays. You can also find those at planetarycalendar.com, where you can also find, of course, our calendars and our books, because you want to know what's going on. So until next time, be well.